recorded.
Good morning and welcome to Onward in Love and Caregiving. And yes, you can tell this is another one of our extremely special programs. When you see Jean right there with me, you know that we're also going to be having some wonderful, wonderful guests. But before we introduce these very special people to you who are celebrating a very special anniversary, I want to take a moment to thank Jean because for us in Onward in Love and Caregiving, this month, September, it's been 1 year, so we've had 12 special programs, and it was Jean who suggested, wouldn't it be fun to share with our friends many of the people with whom we work here in New York? Because as most of you know, this conversation began in Bali 3 years ago, 4 years ago, where we were coming together as various of the ASEAN nations, talking about family caregiving, what you were doing, what other countries were doing, and then looking to see what we might do in the future. And that had gone on for several years. And then you kindly said to me, we'd like to keep the conversation going. And thanks to Eduardo, who said, we can use Facebook Live. Greg, you can do it. It's only on and off. And well, thanks so much. And it has worked. But Jean, thank you so very, very much for these programs and showing me how we can expand technology.
Well, this is our program, Greg. And well, time flies when you're having fun. And we've been running this one for 1 year. And also marks that when we began this program, we are still separated during the pandemic. And you were in New York City, and I was still in Indonesia. And also, that is related with our really, really special guest for this broadcast, because both of them coming from the organizations that involve in all of the activities, especially in the combating religious prejudice, and that is including Indonesia. So this is a very special event, and also the best way to celebrate that one is to have a special guest. So I think
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. And our special guests today are two very dear, dear friends of mine. And now they have come to know Jean. 30 years ago, in 1992, Dr. Georgette Bennett, in memory of her late husband, Rabbi Mark Tanenbaum, created the Tanenbaum Center. And I'm reading this because it's an incredible statement. The Tanenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding. And what is it? It is a secular, non-sectarian, nonprofit that promotes justice and builds respect for religious difference by transforming individuals and institutions to reduce prejudice, violence, and hatred worldwide. And this year, they are celebrating their 30th anniversary. And when I heard that, and Jean has had the privilege of meeting some of the workers about whom you'll hear later, who have been focusing on Indonesia, and we've had some wonderful conversations. And I said to Jean, how could we? And then we said, well, of course, let's celebrate together as it is their 30th anniversary year. And they're doing lots of different events for that. And so today we are thrilled to have Dr. Georgette Bennett and Reverend Mark Fowler, who are going to be with us. And there is Dr. Georgette, whom we're going to, for our conversation, be the friends that we are. We'll be Jean, we'll be Greg, we'll be Mark, and we'll be Georgette. And welcome, welcome.
welcome. And thank you for your availability to join our special program.
Well, thank you for creating this special celebration.
Yes, thank you so much. We're so excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, so I will leave the three of you because later on I will join again, especially on the part where you will share to our audience about the plan on your 30th anniversary, which is very special. Okay, Greg, I will leave you, the three of you, from here, and I'll join you later.
All right, thank you. And we'll do some slides at that point. I think that's perfect. He's the man of technology. You'd never see a slide if I were going to be doing that. So let's begin
Okay, so
where
I
it
will
all
join you later.
began. Okay, bye-bye. Georgette, let's begin with how did you decide to do this? I know you began in your living room, you often say, and I love that because it's certainly grown.
It was actually in my home office. We tried to keep it out of the living room.
I love it.
Yes, my home office, just me and a part-time secretary. But why did I decide to do it? Well, I was very inspired by my late husband. And as you know, Greg, he died 7 weeks before the birth of our only child. And he left me with more than a son, who is the blessing of my life. He also left me with a legacy of confronting hate and building bridges. And because at that time, there were more than 50 conflicts being waged around the world that were based at least in part on religion, I felt there was nothing more important than building on his work. And that's why I decided to start the Tanenbaum Center, not as a memorial to him, because, you know, after about a year or so, nobody's really interested in a dead guy, but to build on his work. And that we've done, not only built on it, but gone off in directions that he probably never even dreamed of. And I think he would have been very happy with the directions in which we've gone.
It's amazing where it has gone. And I've been very blessed and inspired to watch it grow because I have known you for a good part of those 30 years and have attended many of the functions and the galas and
all of them. All of you. You've been incredibly loyal. You show up. You know, not everybody shows up.
Well, you know, I believe you can be, if you can't do anything else, you can be a good audience.
And you're the best.
You're wonderful. It's so marvelous, though, what you have done. And I must say, in my own journey in creating, because we're all of our friends here are, we have people who are caregivers from all over the world. We have people who are social workers, clergy, diversity. And that's one of the great gifts of the world of caregiving. And I've often seen it in parallel to many of the things you do, because we have started with many groups of people of greatly diverse religious backgrounds. And when we put that on the table and just say, that's lovely, we'll talk about it later, but we come together to talk about caregiving. I always remind people it's not cure giving. We're here for caregiving, dealing with what is the present situation and how can we walk with another person. And I have seen again and again, I think of several in Asia that I had the privilege of working with, where various clergy then began to talk to each other because they had talked about something that they shared in common. And that's caring. And as we know, you don't find too many theologies that don't talk about caring and love. So I have always felt a very loving connection to your work. But I'm going to ask you to share with our audience something that you've shared before with me and in other talks. You look at a world that's full of hate and prejudice and conflict, and you say, where am I going to enter? What is the point? What can I do? What can our organization do? And you have a wonderful way of defining that. And it has been, in fact, in setting it up for you, I don't want to say many of the things you've said because I've said them to other people because they impacted my life. and I'm forever grateful. So take it away. The stage is yours.
So I will share my formula, which I think
Thank
is
you.
what you were referring to. But I really want to give Mark an opportunity to jump in, because really, you know, he is the one who is executing. I may have had the initial vision, but a vision doesn't do any good if there aren't people there to execute. And Mark does that brilliantly. But let me get to that formula, because that really is what informed the beginning of the 4 core program areas of the Tanenbaum Center. So when you confront an overwhelming issue, and you just named a few of them, Greg, hate, conflict, etc., you have to find an entry point. And once you find an entry point, you have to identify a gap, because, you know, a new organization, a small organization can't compete with the big boys, and it's really foolish to try. You have to find a gap in the response to whatever that problem is, and then find something doable with which to fill that gap, and then stay tightly focused on that. Because if you let yourself look at the big picture, you'll get paralyzed into inaction. And that really has been the secret of Tanenbaum's success, because we always approach whatever the issue is from an angle that is somewhat different from what others are doing. And I'll quickly give you examples from each of our core areas, and then I'm going to shut up. So first of all, dealing with religious diversity in education. There were a number of very good programs out there, but they all focused on high school students. But what educators and psychologists know is that attitudes, lifelong attitudes, are formed in the primary grades, the early years. So that was a gap that Tanenbaum identified. And so we created curricula and teacher training programs that focused on the early years. Mm-hmm. And these eventually became designated an international best practice. It was only later on that we created programming for high school and college students. The second area was religious diversity in the workplace. As the millennium approach, the entire human resources community was laser focused on Workplace 2000. And a very big piece of that was workplace diversity. But nobody was looking at the religious dimension of diversity. And if you looked at the demographics, the changing demographics in this country, it was so obvious that religion was going to become an issue in the workplace, religious accommodation. So that is a gap that Tanenbaum filled that nobody else was doing. And thanks to Mark, we have now built this extraordinary corporate program where we work with so many Fortune 500 companies, and this is impacting hundreds of thousands of workers around the world. The third area was actually a spinoff from the workplace program, and I think it ties in most closely with the work that you do, Greg, and that is the religious dimension of patient-centered care. Because as part of this changing demographics, you had enormous diversity among caregivers, healthcare providers, and the patient population. And because of that, great cultural gaps between them. So it was very important to train those healthcare providers and caregivers on how can you be sensitive to your patients' religious beliefs or lack thereof, because that becomes an important part of decision-making on the patient's part about end-of-life issues, about reproduction, about all kinds of other things, and has a great impact on medical outcomes. So again, that was a gap that Tanenbaum filled, and Greg, you were very much a part of that, because we literally wrote the book on the medical manual on religio-cultural competency, which your company sponsored and distributed hard copies to all 100,000 doctors in their network. And of course, now it's available online, so anybody can access it. And then finally, the role of religion in conflict resolution. You know, a lot of people think that religion is always the cause of conflict, but it can also be part of the solution to conflict. And there was a lot of work being done in conflict resolution when we got into that game. But the religious approach to conflict resolution, religiously motivated peacemaker practitioners, that was in its infancy. So we did a lot of pioneering work. It started with a seminar we did with Columbia University with the few people who were actually working in that field, and then became our Peacemakers in Action Network, which now operates in conflict zones around the world. We implemented a case study methodology in terms of these individuals, these religiously motivated individuals doing peacemaking work. And that was unique because any other case studies that were being done on organizations and not the individuals on the ground who were doing this extraordinary work, and what we could learn about their techniques and methodologies, which we now use in training diplomats and also in training people in the religious life, because they need conflict resolution skills, and diplomats need to know how to work with religious actors because we ignore that at our peril. So those are the gaps that Tanenbaum filled. And now I'm going to leave a big gap for Mark to fill.
Well, I can't think of a better team than the two of you. And I thank you, Georgette, for going over the 4 pillars, but particularly your formula, because that has been something that certainly has blessed my life. And I have shared it with so many people, but now I've got you on tape, so I can go back and make certain I haven't forgotten things, because
it's there forever. I can't walk it back.
And we don't want you to. But when you tell just this, Mark, it is so thrilling what all of you are doing. And in 30 years, the impact that you have had from your home office to the world stage, it is such a celebration. And Mark, you, I have been friends with for a long time as well.
Yes,
and
indeed.
I can't think of anyone more wonderful. I want you to take the floor now and share with us some of the things that you're focusing on and the things that you'd particularly like to share, and anything particularly that you're doing, and I know there are many of them, within that healthcare frame, because it certainly will speak to our guests.
Absolutely. Well, first, I just want to thank you, Greg, again for inviting us to participate. And I never miss an opportunity to play with Dr. Georgette Bennett, because I always learn something and always have a good laugh. So in this gap that has been created for me, I will say that we continue to actually, in those gaps that we identify, to build within those gaps, and hopefully to make the space wider for those that may come behind us, because at this point, we know that there are so many contributions that Tanenbaum has made in the fields in which we work. And as we really look to the fulfillment of our long-term strategies, it will take bringing on partners and creating strategic partnerships to really fulfill a world where differences are respected, and in particular, where religious differences are respected. I'm really excited actually to share with you some of the things that we're looking at in terms of the healthcare program and some of our other work. During the pandemic, we actually created programming across our program areas. And I think that's one of the interesting things that I've seen in my tenure at Tanenbaum, is that once something gets created in one program area, we sometimes see a need for it or a use for it in another program area. So we created a white paper on vaccines. Before the vaccines were even made available to people, when all of the controversy around whether people would take vaccines or not, during the pandemic, we brought the subject to bear and really kind of dispelled all of the misinformation about vaccines, and in particular, the misinformation about religious communities' relationships to vaccines, so that people could have informed conversations with patients and even with caregivers and medical staff. What we're working on right now, though, is there has long been a need for a national patient survey that looks at religio-cultural competence. We've recognized for some time that without that data, it makes it even more difficult to actually explain to people what's really at stake when a provider doesn't have the capacity or the competence or the skill sets to actually address the needs that patients are expressing and how they want to incorporate religion and spirituality into their treatment plan. So we, in the next few years, hope to do a national patient survey where we can find out across the country what are the various ways in which people have been experiencing their providers and their caregivers attending to their needs around their spiritual beliefs and practices, and where are the gaps? Where are the places where, as an industry and as an institution, we want to provide training and resources so that no one has the experience of poor healthcare because their religious and spiritual needs are not being addressed. We're also in the process of creating a hospital index that will provide institutions a way to evaluate their institutional policies on religious accommodations, to be able to assess staff members' awareness and application of those policies, and to really measure patient satisfaction when it comes to the ways in which their religious beliefs are being incorporated into their treatment plan. So we're in the process right now of conducting the first one with a major healthcare system, and we hope to then make that hospital index available to other hospital systems for their use and the evaluation of their policies. We also are going to be doing some work around the relationship of transforming healthcare organizations so that they promote workforce equity, in particular around Muslim physicians. We are partnering with one of the members of our Healthcare Program Advisory Council who has done some research with Muslim physicians on how they are experiencing bias both in their practice, the bias that they experience from colleagues, from the administration, and from patients. And we believe that this can be the foundation of a broader survey of religious and spiritually motivated healthcare physicians, and what are they experiencing in terms of bias and discrimination. So we've got a lot on the fire in terms of our healthcare program. And if you will, there are 3 other burners for the other program.
That is,
He's really good. Isn't he really good?
he's the best. That is just so amazing. And, you know, I'm sitting here as you're talking of this because when this program began, it was for that conversation that we were having. Because when you're dealing with the caregiving, constantly you are having situations where the big questions, as Georgette was speaking of before, come up. And so the focus of this program has always been family caregiving, faith, and spirituality. And of course, being a long-term member of the 12-step world, it's as you understand, always here, or as you don't understand. And the gift is when that sort of a conversation takes place, so much is opened. There's so much more room. So I love where you're heading with, you know, I'm prejudiced completely about those programs, but that is so exciting. And I am going to be putting up the link to the manual when because we post this onto Facebook, and I'm going to have that there because it's simply a wonderful, wonderful tool. And that was an early part of your work, but the surveys, the whole thing, are fabulous. Now,
Yeah,
tell us a little bit more, if you would, about the other pillars.
absolutely. So in our education work, as Georgette mentioned, we started out with a very heavy focus on curriculum and filling that gap of the curriculum that wasn't available in the elementary level. Then we developed a number of curricula over the years. And there was a decision made shortly before I started my tenure at Tanenbaum, where we had an independent survey that was done of the education program. And the surveyors said, you know, your curricula is wonderful, but what people report that they really get value out of is the training that you provide on how to teach about religion and how to address religion in a way that doesn't try to indoctrinate children into a particular understanding, but really builds their competence and their capacity to appreciate differences. So since 2007, we've been doing a lot of work focused on educator training, but we then saw another gap within the last couple of years where we said we've been spending a lot of time providing training for teachers, but there's so many other members of the ecosystem of a school or a school system. So over the last couple of years, we have been engaging in models where we train teachers and parents and students within a school setting, and really trying to plant the seeds both for them to understand the nuances of when religion becomes important to us and how that can guide the conversations and even the ways in which we see the world, but also giving them some foundational information and some training around conflict resolution. And to Georgette's point, some of the very lessons that we've learned from our peacemakers are lessons that we now incorporate into our training in schools and school systems. We've also been expanding our model so that we are working with advisory boards of educators who are working in classrooms right now. They work to implement our curriculum and our lessons in their classrooms and then give us immediate feedback on how it's going, how are they adapting the curricula, how are the students responding. And we started that work in New York, and now we're doing that work in Detroit and in Houston and soon in Florida. So in my mad mind, over the next couple of years, we want to have advisory boards all over the country as well as outside of the United States. And I'm feeling that there's a conference coming down the road somewhere where we can gather together teachers and students and parents to talk about how do they build respect and build these inclusive learning environments that are respectful of religious differences. In our workplace work, as Georgette mentioned, we have 65 corporations and institutions who are members of our membership program. The program over the last 2 to 3 years has grown by about 40%.
Yes.
And while we were in the early years, really, I mean, Georgette and my predecessor, Joyce Dubinsky, kind of like pounding on doors to tell people there's a train coming and you're going to get run over if you don't pay attention to religious diversity in the workplace. Well, now we have companies that are coming to us, wanting us to support them in their efforts to create faith-based employee resource groups, to review their policies, to provide trainings for their managers and for their workforce, and sometimes to advise them on the work that they're doing around their product design and product creation, their marketing campaigns, and doing briefings for the C-suite on how is religion impacting the world in addition to their unique industry. And finally, in our peace building work, we have written 2 amazing volumes of case studies of the peacemakers in action. And we do still have more to write, but we made the decision about 5 years ago that it takes a lot to actually put that book together, to do those case studies, to do the research, to do the interviews. And then they can sometimes be limited in terms of the numbers of people who have access to them. So last year we completed and launched our first set of case studies that are in a podcast format. They're available on all major platforms. And the first 2 podcasts of our peacemaker from Sri Lanka, Jishani Jayawera, and our peacemaker from Indonesia, the Reverend Jackie Manaputi. And you get to hear their voice and telling their story, in addition to scholars and colleagues of them giving commentary on why their work was so important in the conflicts in those areas. And next year is our next working retreat where we gather our peacemakers together so that they can have some time, one, to just reconnect, because if you will, the experience that many people have had with the pandemic of being in isolation, our peacemakers have experienced that the entire time they gave their life to peace building. So our working retreat becomes one of the opportunities where they're able to gather together with people who uniquely understand the kind of work that they're doing and the kind of sacrifice that it takes. But our peacemakers also work with each other across conflict zones in, we call them interventions. And so during the working retreat, the peacemakers will talk with each other and strategize about the ways in which they want to leverage the knowledge and the wisdom and the better practices of their colleagues to impact peace building broadly defined, but also to continue to raise the profile of religiously based and spiritually based peace building. So as I mentioned, there's a lot going on.
And then what do you do on Friday? You collapse.
I have an offer. I chat with you and Georgette. That's what I do on Friday.
I just love each and every program, and I just must do a thank you to you because I have always been impressed by all of the programs, but I'm always learning, and I love that. And I love being around wonderful people like you who give me ideas. And I loved the concept when you were going into corporations. That really excited me. And I'm very blessed now. I have been 22 years with Emblem Health and serve as the chief advisor for family caregiving to the CEO. And they're wonderfully supportive when I come in and say, oh, I have an idea. Well, a number of years ago, I came with what you were doing. And I said, I believe, and I don't know if I'm right, but you know, the show business in me says, let's give it a try. We'll take it to give it a try. What could we could learn something out of it? And I felt that bringing caregiving into the workplace was exactly what needed to be done, because that employee who is working a full or part-time job also has a 24/7 job as a caregiver, and it may be for more than one person. So none of them has time to go to another's place to get support. But I also felt that by bringing that into the workplace, just as you have, we would be bringing the words, we would be bringing the names, we would name it and know its many faces, which is one of my favorite topics. And we would help to begin the dialogue, that it wasn't something that people couldn't talk about. It wasn't an excuse for not doing something, but it was a reality of who that whole person was. And with the growth of ERGs, the employee resource groups, particularly here in America, that sort of thing began to be welcome. So I took one client of ours, a colleague who is part of the Emblem family, as it were, and I began doing programs with them. And I can't begin to tell you, we've now been doing it for 2 years, challenged by technology and all the not being able to be together physically. But the results have been unbelievable in the ways in which the employees are reacting one to the other. One of my favorites was 2 employees who sit together for 10 years. One day, because as it went along, it really became education, it became resources, and then as we got comfortable, it became much of a support group, which was wonderful. Well, this one woman began to really tell her story, that she had been doing enormous caregiving for 10 years. And the woman sitting next to her said, I've sat next to you for 10 years. I never knew you did any of this. Let me do your grocery shopping. Now, I mean, that's as practical as it comes, but that's what it's about. And I'm just desperately grateful to you. So, you have had your ripple effect, and I'm at the point where Georgette and Joyce are knocking on the doors saying, caregiving, caregiving, let us help. And like all of you, I'm always interested that when I do go into a corporation, and I say that I'm doing in the work of family caregiving, the minute the executive officer immediately starts talking to me about their grandparents, I think, yes. And that's the excitement. But you know, it's bringing this to the person where they are.
Yes.
And allowing them, therefore, to be their full person, physically, emotionally, spiritually, what they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And it ultimately makes them far better workers. I mean, this particular corporation that we've done this pilot with has been very verbal about that. And so that's it. But I wanted to just take one moment to say thank you to the two of you. And of course to our Joyce, because when I first started it, she was very much the CEO, and we would talk about this, and I came to have a better understanding. But these are the wonderful things that you may not even be aware that you're fostering in a very small way, but it's so exciting. And I love the idea of a conference.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. No, there
More
are
to come.
more to come is right. Now, I'm going to ask Gene to come and join us. I think he can hear me. Yes,
Yes, of course. I will be here and with the three of you.
Gene, can you just show us the slides that were put together with Tanenbaum? And we won't read the whole things, but they were so beautiful. I want you to see them. And then the final slide talks about October 19th. And so I want you to be as commercial as you like. Just go for it. Okay, Gene, let's see. Oh, this is so wonderful. I marvel at anybody can do these sorts of things. And this
Yes,
shows,
so I think it's very beautiful that this year is like the 30th anniversary of Tanenbaum. And then there are just like a new logo where we communicate with the communications teams of Tanenbaum that they would like to deliver the message that this year is a very special year for Tanenbaum. And of course, you would like to explain later on because you will have like special activity for the anniversary and the celebrations. And this one is just like your profile and also Mark's profile. And we will share this one with our audience so they know that if they would like to have more information about Tannenbaum and also the activities that the organization is doing all over the world, then they know who to reach. Okay, so probably Georgette and
there we
Mark,
are.
yes, you could share more information about the 30th anniversary gala and what's next, because as Mark says that there are so many things coming, so that will be interesting to hear.
Yes, yes. And as we go back, I just have to say, I love your tagline. Imagine, create, build. I don't think I've known a group of people who have lived their tagline more than you folks. Imagine, create, build. I love it.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
Now tell us about the gala.
Georgette, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'm a great believer that it's important for founders to get out of the way. So I'm going to get out of the way and let Mark do his thing.
Well, I am
And
happy
it
to do
doesn't
this
go
thing.
well, bless your heart.
So on October 19th, this year, 2022, at 6 p.m. in New York, we will be hosting our Peace Made Possible Gala, which will also be one of almost the last event of our 30th anniversary year. We are honoring a number of organizations and individuals. We're honoring our own Dr. Judy Banke, who's been our special advisor on interreligious affairs. and worked very closely with our namesake, Rabbi Mark Tanenbaum. We are going to be honoring the companies Allstate and PwC will also they'll both be receiving our Corporate Bridge Builder Award, and PwC is actually our presenting sponsor for the gala. So it is presented by PwC, and we're very grateful for their support. We're also going to be honoring in our inaugural year of our Justice Bridge Builder Award, Dr. Munir Bushanaki, who has been doing a great deal of work over the years with UNESCO World Heritage Sites and their protection. And I am forgetting one of the honorees. Who am I forgetting? Now maybe I'm not forgetting.
School, Trevor Day School.
Yes. We are going to be honoring Trevor Day School with our Adam Solomon Award for Excellence for their work in doing religious diversity and inclusion work across the entire school for the better part of the last school year. So we have an extraordinary evening plan. There are sponsorship levels, ads, tables, individual tickets that people can access, and we would have greatly appreciate your support. You can find that information at Tanenbaum.org/30th anniversary.
And we will be putting that on each of the places we put this up, and of course we'll be sending it to you to do as well.
And I would just add that for those people who are unable to attend in person, it will also be available virtually.
Very good.
We will be live streaming from the Edison Ballroom, which will be our venue. So no one has to feel that they can't participate.
You see, we did learn a lot in that lockdown, didn't we?
And we certainly did.
And I think you produced some wonderful galas that way.
Well, Mark, that will be perfect because, Greg, we could share that link also once we upload our broadcast, this one, because I think there are so many people that would like to participate, would like to join, but because of the activities and also their the time difference, so they would like to join online, including ourselves, because on that day, we will have our own special event. I will be the caregiver as well as the...
You are wonderful, Jean. Absolutely, absolutely. And I just cannot say enough thank you to both of you for being with us and giving time this morning that we could have the chance to take a walk down memory lane in many ways, but also to celebrate the incredible work that Tanenbaum has done and continues to do. But having both of you here has been such a joy, and it was so special that Jean is now officially here.
And Greg, we want to thank you because you have been a very important part of those memories down memory lane and an absolutely steadfast supporter of ours year after year after year. Yes. And we are extraordinarily grateful to you.
Yes, indeed we are.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Georgette. Thank you, Mark. Blessings to you. And I'm sitting here as you've been talking. I have a mental list of people I can't wait to send this to for lots of reasons. I have always been a person who arranges things. This has been wonderful. We wish you 30 years and 30 years and 30 years more. It's been a joy being with you, and we look forward to having an update from all of you. So until we meet again, we have a way of closing our broadcasts with everyone. We always say, onward in love and caregiving. Namaste.
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 We'll see you real soon. Thank you.
Thank you.